I wasn't supposed to move into that apartment. At least, that's what the landlord told me later. But when I first saw the listing online, it looked like a miracle. A one-bedroom apartment in the middle of the city. Rent was almost half the price of everything else around it. At first, I thought it had to be a scam. But when I called the number, an older man answered. His voice sounded tired. He said the apartment had been empty for months and he just wanted someone to take it. That should have been the first warning. But I ignored it, because when you're desperate for a place to live, cheap rent can make you overlook a lot of things. When I arrived to see the apartment, the building looked older than the photos online. It was one of those tall concrete apartment blocks built sometime in the 1970s. The paint was peeling in places, and the hallway lights flickered like they hadn't been replaced in years. Still, the place wasn't terrible, just old. The landlord met me outside the door to the apartment. He barely made eye contact when he handed me the key. "Apartment 307, he said quietly. Then he added something strange. "Just don't make too much noise at night." I laughed. "Thin walls?" He hesitated before answering. "Something like that." At the time, I thought he was joking. Now I wish I had asked more questions. The apartment itself was small but clean. A living room, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. The windows looked out over a narrow alley between buildings. It wasn't much of a view, but I didn't care. I signed the lease that same day. The landlord seemed almost relieved when I did. In fact, when I handed him the signed papers, he looked at me for a moment like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just nodded and left. I moved in 2 days later. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. I remember lying in bed and noticing how strangely silent the building felt. No footsteps in the hallway, no voices through the walls, just the occasional hum of old pipes somewhere in the building. But that didn't bother me. After weeks of searching for an apartment, I was just happy to finally have a place. The second night was when things started to feel strange. I woke up sometime after midnight. At first, I didn't know what had woken me. Then I heard it, a faint sound, like something lightly scraping against wood. It came from somewhere inside the apartment. I sat up in bed and listened. The sound stopped. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it. Then it started again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was faint, but steady. It seemed to be coming from the closet in the bedroom. I stared at the closet door in the dark. It was slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it open. For a moment, I considered getting up to check it. But then the sound stopped again. And after a few minutes of silence, I convinced myself it was probably just the building settling. Old buildings make strange noises. At least that's what I told myself. The next morning, I checked the closet. Nothing. Just an empty space and the faint smell of old wood. I shrugged it off and went to work. For the next few days, everything seemed normal. Then one evening, I was rearranging the furniture in the bedroom when something strange happened. I pulled the dresser away from the wall to vacuum behind it. And that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a crack in the wall. But when I knelt down to look closer, I realized it was actually the edge of something. A small rectangular outline, almost perfectly hidden in the wall behind the dresser. I brushed some dust away with my hand. That's when I saw the hinges. It wasn't a crack. It was a door. A small, narrow door built directly into the wall. I stared at it for a long time. It was about the size of a crawlspace entrance. Maybe 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Just big enough for someone to crawl through. My first thought was that it probably led to plumbing or wiring. But something about it made me uneasy. The paint on the door matched the wall so perfectly that it looked like someone had intentionally tried to hide it. And the handle was on my side, which meant the door was meant to be opened from inside the apartment. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to open it. Finally, curiosity won. I grabbed the small metal handle and pulled. The door creaked softly as it opened. Behind it was darkness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light revealed a narrow space behind the wall. It wasn't just a crawl space. It was a small hallway. A hallway that extended several feet into the building. My stomach tightened, because this clearly wasn't meant for maintenance. The floor inside the hallway had old wooden boards. Someone had built this space deliberately. I crouched down and shined the light further inside. The hallway led to another door at the far end. A second door, inside the wall. At that point, I should have closed the door and forgotten about it. But curiosity is a powerful thing. So I crawled inside. The air in the hidden hallway was cold and stale. Dust covered the floor. But something caught my attention almost immediately. There were footprints. Not fresh ones, but definitely footprints. My heart started beating faster. Someone had been inside this space before. I slowly crawled toward the second door. It was made of old wood. And unlike the first door, this one didn't have a handle, only a small metal latch. I hesitated. Something about the silence inside the wall made my skin crawl. But I had already come this far. So I lifted the latch. The door opened slowly. Behind it was a tiny room, maybe 6 feet wide, 6 feet long, bare concrete walls, a single chair in the center, and something on the wall directly in front of it. Photos, dozens of photos. My breath caught in my throat when I realized what they were. They were pictures of my bedroom, my bed, my desk, my closet, taken from different angles. But the most disturbing part was the dates written on the corners of the photos. Some of them were recent, very recent. One of them had yesterday's date. My hands started shaking as I looked closer, because in several of the photos, I was in them, sleeping, sitting at my desk, walking across the room. Someone had been taking pictures of me inside my apartment, from inside the walls. Then I noticed something else. The chair in the room faced a small hole in the wall, peephole, perfectly positioned to look directly into my bedroom. I slowly stepped closer to the wall and looked through it. My bedroom stared back at me. The peephole was hidden behind a small crack in the wall near the ceiling. From the bedroom, it would be almost impossible to notice. A cold wave of realization hit me. Someone had been watching me for days, maybe longer, and then I noticed the final detail that made my stomach drop. The chair in the room wasn't covered in dust like everything else. It looked recently used. That's when I heard it. The faint sound behind me, a movement. Inside the hallway, my entire body froze. Slow footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming closer. Someone was inside the walls, and they were heading toward me. My heart started pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I turned off my phone flashlight instantly. The room plunged into darkness. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the hidden hallway. Then a slow creak. The first door, the one that led back into my bedroom. Someone had opened it. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps moved again, slow, careful, getting closer to the small room where I was hiding. In that moment, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Whoever was inside the walls had probably been living there the entire time, watching me, waiting for the moment I discovered the door. And now, they knew I was inside their hiding place. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard breathing, very close, right outside the door, and a voice whispered in the darkness, "You weren't supposed to find this." And if that story made you even a little uncomfortable, Imagine turning off your lights tonight and wondering what might be hidden just out of sight. If you enjoyed this kind of slow, creeping horror, take a second to like the video and subscribe to Midnight Story Room. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found a hidden door in your room? Would you open it or pretend it was never there? Stay with me because the next story is even darker, and you won't see it coming.